Good morning, everyone. This is Joyce at Quilt Beginnings, and Kathy and actually Emily are behind the counter. You just can't see them, but we miss you so much, and we welcome you to our AccuQuilt Club. We wish you were here with us, and if you were here with us, you know I'd have some special treat for you. So I think this morning I was thinking, wouldn't lemon bars have been nice for this time of year? So the nice thing about filming is you can just stop the video, you can put me on pause, you can run to your kitchen or wherever you are, get something that you like to eat, maybe make a cup of coffee or tea, and just sit down and enjoy today, all right? So our AccuQuilt Club that we started at the beginning of the year before COVID hit and everybody was sequestered, and who knew what you were doing being so productive behind the doors, and many of you have already completed your AccuQuilt Go outside the box quilt, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this is what we're doing for Club this year, or what we started to do, and it is Eleanor Burns' book about taking the Qube to the next level. And since some of you, actually most of you, have been with us for our 5 years, this is our 5th year of Club, you already know about the Qube, but there are a couple of you that are brand new to our club who don't even, you're kind of worried already about how does this thing work and how is the right way to cut my fabric and what is a Qube. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Eleanor Burns, when she wrote this book, she just really hit it out of the park about, you know, her illustrations are so good. Her directions are very simple to read. So if I were to cut all this out and you watch me sew, you would turn me off a long time ago. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to kind of go back to the basics. It's always good to go back to the basics a little bit just to make sure you're doing things the right way, reinforcing good habits, right? All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about the different block sizes. What is this book all about? We're going to talk about the right way to rough cut your fabric to put it on the die. What is the right way to cut the die? I mean, your fabric. How does it go through your machine? All those types of things. And then we're going to talk about this book. We're going to walk through what is this? This is a big old book. What does this mean? There's all these pictures and there's different quilts and what is the layout of this? And so we're going to make good sense out of this for you, all right? Then I'm going to show you how just some good tips and tricks, everybody, that you can pick up, you know, through some of the things that maybe you didn't know. And so if you're a seasoned AccuQuilt cutter person, you may pick something up new. So stay tuned, stay with us, okay? All right. So first of all, you guys already know about the Qube, most of you, but what they are is they're 6-inch fit. This one is what I did mine in. This is my quilt, my club quilt, has the 9 blocks. We use the Qube and the companion, but the Qube comes in different sizes, 6-inch finish, that's what I used, 8-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch. Those are all the Qube sizes available. And so we've been doing this, again, this is our 5th year. We've been using our Qube, and we've been doing our finished blocks in these sizes. So what Eleanor Burns did is she came out with this book, Go Outside the Box. So it's like, think outside of the box. Instead of just having a 6-inch Qube, I can use that Qube and make it into a 9-inch Qube. And so what we did, let me show you. This is actually the Cups and Saucers block from the book, but here is a 6-inch Qube. So my little 6-inch Qube makes these adorable blocks. I love the 6-inch Qube. But I can make this also with it. This is the same shapes that are in the Qube, and I can make a 9-inch block with it. Isn't that great? So for those of you who are using your different sizes, whatever sizes you happen to have in your house, again, your 6-inch Qube will make 9-inch blocks. Your 8-inch Qube will make 12-inch blocks. Your 9-inch Qube will make 13.5-inch blocks. Isn't that a weird number? And then your 10-inch Qube will make 15-inch blocks. And then the 12-inch Qube, that really big one, will make 18-inch blocks. So, I mean, make a few blocks with that one and you'll have a whole quilt done in no time. So that is the beauty of this, and it's really fun. I've seen from some of you, you are so inspiring. You already got your whole quilt done. You've brought them, you sent me pictures. You've brought them to our parking lot for show and tell. Now that we're open again, I've seen them in the building, and so I've taken some pictures and we'll share it with the email that we send to you so you can enjoy them as well and get some inspiration, okay? now that you know all about the Qube, we've seen the outside, we've talked about the different sizes, let's take a look at what's inside the Qube. So there are 8 different dies with the basic Qube. So you have a square, you have more cute little squares, you have half square triangles, you have quarter square triangles. We're going to move these over. Look at these. We have cute little half square triangles. We have a square on point. We have a parallelogram. Isn't that adorable? And then we have rectangles. So all of these are the same shapes in every Qube. They're just different sizes. And so the way that she does this, you're probably wondering, how in the world can I get a Qube that makes 6-inch squares and get a 9-inch block out of it? So this is the way. Let me show you a visual. You'll see that these are both half square triangles. One's smaller than the other, right? So if I exchange in the pattern this larger half square triangle for this one, then it's going to make my Qube bigger, my block bigger, right? Same thing with my squares. We have a large square and then we have our little squares. Same idea when we're putting it together. Now we're going to talk about fabric and the right way to put fabric on. Now, if you've talked to me in the store before when you were considering buying an AccuQuilt cutter, I always tell you this is the best way to use up your scraps. Use up every little bit of your fabric after you've cut out a quilt, you sewn it together, you have those bits and pieces left over. So now you can use it and cut out usable shapes, put them in a bin. They're already ready to go for your next quilt or maybe a surprise, baby shower or something like that. You'll be all ready to go. But if you're really taking the time, you want precision, there is a right way to do your cutting. So here is the image of 4 of the smaller half square triangles. This is die 5. It's probably one of the most popular dies in the Qube. And so what we're going to do, we talk about, rotary cutters, you don't have to use as much anymore, right? Because your blades are embedded into the die. The nice thing about this is your foam is two-tone, so you know exactly where to place your fabric. When you're cutting, when we talk about rough cutting, we're talking about getting it in the area where it's going to cover up your foam, so it doesn't have to even be straight. Isn't that wonderful? So if your fabric slips or your ruler slips, a little bit and moves over, you don't have to get a straight edge again. It's okay. As long as you're covering this, you're in good shape. All right? You'll notice on this particular die, all the dies are this way, there is a label. So this label is an indicator of which way the straight grain of your fabric should go, all right? So, and you're like, well, what is the straight grain of fabric? What does that mean? So here is a bolt of fabric, all right? And your straight grain is your selvage edge. So this edge at the bottom, and the reason for it's called a straight grain is because it's woven that way. It's tight. It's really tight. There's no give to that. When we normally cut our strips, we normally cut from selvage edge to the selvage edge, right? We're going to cut this direction. That's called the cross grain. So the cross grain is going to have a little bit of give, not a lot, but much more than the straight grain. And then of course we have the bias, which has a stretch. Okay, so we don't normally cut on the bias for our shapes. Let me put this down. So let's say you had some scrap fabric left over and you're not sure which way is the straight grain. There is a way to tell. First of all, you can pull it and you can feel the tightness, and you probably can't hear, but there is a higher pitch with the straight grain. And this is the cross grain. It's deeper, right? So we want to do the straight grain towards our label. Straight grain towards the label. Once I've determined that, I have so many people, that ask me, my dies are crooked. Why are my shapes crooked on my dies? They think something's wrong with it, but no, it's supposed to be that way because it's engineered. So as it goes under your rollers, if you have your straight grain facing your label, then that label is going to go on the outside of your rollers, and with this being at an angle, it's like driving over a speed bump. It's going to grab part of your fabric first and then continue rolling it through instead of like hitting the whole thing like this and then possibly shifting your fabric, which is not what you want. So they thought of everything. So when we do a rough cut, when Eleanor talks about that in her book, you're going to take your shape right here, okay? We have our label, so straight grain goes here. I'm going to measure right here, my shape. So if you can see this, it's about 4 3/4 inches from edge to edge. And we normally would add about a 1/2 inch, and that'll give us like 1/4 inch on either side, just to make sure you have good coverage. But if it's not exact, it's okay. It's okay. As long as you don't see that image underneath, it's going to cut for you. All right? So that is, let's say that that is 5 1/4 inches, if that's what we want to cut our strip. So we're going to cut our strip 5 1/4 inches wide because we want to get the straight grain there. And then if you wanted to just cut out one layer, you would measure this direction. So that would be, that's 2 1/2, so we would make it about 3 inches, and that would cut one layer. But here's the trick. We can take our fabric, and actually what I can do is I can actually take both edges, and since this is a batik, you can't tell that I really didn't cut off the selvage edges, but I do encourage you to cut off your selvage edges. You don't need that in your block, right? So selvage edges, which is my straight grain. There's my label. I have 2 layers because it's folded. I'm going to put it over my shape like this. 2 layers. Kathy, how many? Oh, yeah, 2 layers of fabric, right? 1, 2 so far, right? 1, 2. Oh, yeah. Kathy's giving me direction behind the camera. I wish you could see her. Kathy, how many layers of fabric can I put on an AccuQuilt?
6.
6 layers, yes. 6 is the right answer for cotton fabrics that you can cut at one time. So I have 2 layers right now, and so this is called fan folding. And you'll notice that I have it at an angle, right? My straight grain goes this way, but now I've aligned it with the shape on my die at that angle. That is correct, okay? So I have 2 layers. Then I'm going to come back this way. That's 4 layers. Excuse me while I put that down. All right. And then if I come back again, that is 6 layers. All right. Now you can cut that if you want. I'm just going to put my mat on. So your mat should fit your die. Okay. It needs to at least cover whatever it is that you're wanting to cut. Now if you don't have a mat on it, it's not going to cut it. All right, so you have to have that through. I've got my label on the outside, and then I'm demonstrating on our Go. This is the original Go. It's also the same machine that comes with the wonderful Ready Set Go. I personally love to use my Go Big, but really there's not a lot to tell you on how to use it because you just push it and it goes and it cuts it. So I do have questions with this one sometimes. So all you have to do is take your die and you're going to bring it up to the rollers. See, when I do that, I don't know if you can tell, but my handle is moving, and I know that it's up in position, okay? So once it's up to my rollers, I can just take that lever, and then, oh, this is so easy. And then I'm just gonna roll it through just like that. See, I'm not holding on to it, it's just doing the trick by itself. And here we go. Now we're not going to just lift this up because there's static electricity that was just created because it's compression cutting, okay? So what I'm going to do, they say give it some little loving, but you can just kind of get rid of some of that static. But if you just press and twist it off, then you don't have half of your fabric in different directions. And then what I like to do is I like to just kind of put my fingers on the shapes and then just remove all the excess there, and then my shapes are there. So there was very little waste, but now I have 6, 12, 18, and 24. I can do my math here. So I just cut out 24 little half square triangles that easily. They have the little corners cut off, and they're just a breeze to sew together. So that is the way that you correctly cut. All right, everyone, now we're going to take a walk through the book. Now that you know the proper way to cut, we're going to look at how this book was written, the layout. So the beginning of it just tells you information that I just covered about the right way to, like what's in the cube, and the difference in the sizes that you can get out of your cube. It talks about piecing, what's the right equipment. You know, you always need a good sewing machine, and we have plenty of those here at Quilt Beginnings. We can fix you right up, all right? So the next thing she talks about fabric and cutting with your different dies, how to use your cutter, you know, bringing it up to the rollers and how easy it is to turn that handle and get your fabric through. We're going to have some more tips and tricks on different ways to cut, like flip-flop cutting and smart stacking, things like that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. First, I want you to kind of know how to navigate this book, because it could be a little bit confusing your first look-see, and I don't want you to just put it away. I want you to use it, all right? So, we're going to start here on page 18. This is the 6-inch cube, and you think, okay, well, what does this mean? So it says 6-inch cube sampler with Tutti Frutti border. So pretty much what she's saying is, this is, if you're using your 6-inch cube, these are the blocks. This border that they have the instructions for will fit around your 9 blocks that you choose. And then here, this is where you're going to get your fabric requirements, okay? It's not your directions. It's just kind of like, here's your quilt with your 6-inch cube, and here are the fabric requirements that you need, okay? That's on page 18 of your book. If you flip over to 20, well, look, there's the 8-inch cube. 8-inch cube. They also have a Tutti Frutti border, different colors, so isn't this great inspiration? It kind of gets you out there playing with different colors or, you know, ideas of what you might like to use. But here are the fabric requirements for the 8-inch cube. Then we turn the page. Here's the 9-inch. Isn't that fun? Also, this one is also with a Tutti Frutti border, but right here are the fabric requirements that you're going to need. This is one of my favorite borders. This is with a 10-inch cube, and so this is called the geese border, and it looks kind of southwestern to me. I love this one, and if I do another one, I think I'm going to do this border. I love that. We turn the page, we finally get to the 12-inch cube. So the 12-inch cube, they have it paired with a signature border. So the signature border uses the signature shape, which is out of the companion corners. The other ones use the companion angles. Those are both additional cubes that work together with your original size, and they have shapes, different shapes in them that work together. So they are hard to cut with a ruler, but so easy with an AccuQuilt cutter. You'll love it. All right, so those are your fabric requirements. So right, easy. If you know what size cube you have, go to this page and figure out how much fabric you need. With that being said, I do want to say it's really fun if you have scraps, and I've seen some of these quilts that have come back. You know, you can just kind of take this as a knowledge thing about maybe how much fabric to use total, but use your scraps, play with it, and I'll show you why here in just a minute. Now we're going to move on to the actual blocks that are in the quilt. There are 9 blocks you can see behind me. I don't even remember the names of them just by looking at it, but there are 9 blocks on this quilt, and so you can choose whichever ones you want, because some of these have, they'll say make 2, and you're going to be making more blocks than what you need. Or but they only have patterns for 8, so figure that one out, and I'll tell you how I figured it out too. All right, but this is the really nice part about your instructions. Now that you know how to use your machine, how to cut your fabric, and you also know how much fabric you will possibly need, let's talk about the blocks themselves. The first one is the Silent Star. It's on page 28. So it gives you, each of their blocks gives you a picture of the block itself. But I love this part right here. This part is almost like a coloring book. You can trace it, you can make copies of this page, and then you can audition different colors. Get out your coloring pencils or crayons or whatever, and see how this block can change incredibly just by the use of color placement. So this is really nice also to be able to tell what is the die number and how does that go together. So the wonderful thing about cutting with the cubes is they're all numbered 1 through 8 for the standard cube, and then you just see where it's placed on here, and it's like, okay, I can sew number 3 to number 3, and those number 3s go together with these number 4s. So it's, you really don't even need to read the instructions, but there are some good tips in there. But so that makes it really wonderful. Right here next to the block are your fabric, which fabrics to use. So for instance, on this one, she has a light medium, a dark medium, a dark, first dark, which is the red here, and a second dark, which is where she has her greens. So you kind of know how many fabrics you need, how many varieties of fabric that you need, okay? Then we're going to come over here, and at first glance people are like, what in the world is this? But actually it's really cool. It's instructions for all the cube sizes as far as how much to cut, all on one page. So for instance, here on the left side of your page will show numbers on front of the shapes, okay? So for instance, this is number 3, which is die 3, the larger of your half square triangles in your block. Number 4, twice. You'll see that it's listed here twice, but with different fabrics. Those are your quarter square triangles. And finally, another number 4, which is another use of your quarter square triangle. So actually, to construct this block, you're using 2 dies, number 3 and number 4. Now, with that being said, if we go to the far right of your page, you'll see that she has listed here which fabrics you're going to use with that particular die. So she has her light, her first light and her second dark right here, and it's kind of color coordinated, right? And so then you're going to go over here now, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12. I bet you can guess what that's for. So with me doing my 6-inch cube, I just look at that top line. It tells me for my 6-inch cube, I'm going to use these 2 fabrics, my light and my second dark, with my die 3, right? And then I'm going to cut one. This is your rough cut sizes: 1 4 3/4 by 8-inch piece of fabric. Okay, so you're going to get a piece of fabric about that size, and then it tells you to fold it in half. Once you have that piece, you're just going to put it onto your die, put your mat on, send it through your cutter, and you're done. That one's ready to go. And you all know that I love to get my little trays out, and after I cut that out, I'm just going to set it on my tray. I'm going to go to my next one and then start cutting that one out. Die number 4. I'm going to go to the 6th line, my 6-inch cube, that first line. I'm going to cut a 4 3/4 inch square because that's going to cover my die. I'll get 4 of these little quarter square triangles out of it, okay? It talks about smart stacking here, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But that's how you read this. Don't worry about that there's so many letters and numbers and words on this page. You just focus on what you're doing. Do you have a 6-inch cube? You're just going to follow that first line. Let's talk about the construction now. We've got all our parts cut out. They're neatly by our machine. Now she's going to go. This is wonderful. This is why I figured I can't do a one-up on Eleanor. She knows her stuff, right? She has really great pictures on here to take you step by step with what you're doing. So I just turned the page from where we had cut out our pieces. I turned the page. Now here are the instructions. No matter what size cube you have, how big or how small your shapes are, the instructions are going to be the same. And so she will just take you step by step. She talks about how you're going to sew it together. You will want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then she talks about how to flip one piece onto another. She tells you how to press, which direction to press your fabric so they'll all nest together. Sometimes she'll tell you how to, actually at the bottom here, it's a really small piece to zoom in on, but what it is, and we've done this a couple times in class, but it's twirling that seam where you have like a 4 pieces of fabric that meet together. If we just pressed everything like towards the dark, for instance, what happens a lot of times is right in that middle where they all converge, all your seams converge, it's this big bump. And I know Katie's told me this. They don't like to quilt over those. You know, if you quilt by check or you're a long armor and you do your own quilting or whatever, when you get to those big seams, you may break a needle, your stitch length may change, it may try to hop over that. So in order to avoid that, making your seams as flat as possible is a really good idea. So that's a really great tip. You're going to see it again here in just a bit. All right, now I just want you to see what different blocks are making this quilt together for us. So we already talked about the silent star. That's the first one. Really easy to do. The next one is bear tracks. So these are the first 2 that we actually started with. So I know a lot of you already have this one done. Both of these blocks done. But here is bear tracks. Same format. You're going to have the picture of your block. You're going to have an option here to see what dies are used, how they're laid out in there. A coloring option if you choose to play with that. what fabrics you need, how to cut them, etc. They're all going to be that way, and then you'll have your instructions on the next page. Next will be cups and saucers, which is actually the block that I showed you right here. Let me grab it. This is cups and saucers. So that would be the next one. Then we jump over to friendship blocks. When we get to the friendship blocks, you'll see that they tell you to cut for 2, and that's all totally up to you. I thought it kind of looked like an anvil. I'm not sure what that has to do with friends, but they tell you to cut for 2. You can do whatever you want. Again, this is a great way to use your scraps. You can audition different placements, so go ahead and make an extra one, and it won't hurt you any. It's good practice to get to sewing. But if you look at the little printout right here of just the black and white, you can see that you can put a lot of different shapes in there to make it a totally different looking block. You can name it after yourself. All right, after the friendship block, we have the treasure box. First I didn't like this one so much, but I ended up liking it a lot, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. Just stay tuned. All right, next we have Grandma's Star. So again, if you were to look at this right here, you can see that you can get a totally different look of this block. I don't know if you can see that star in here, but what is that? It's an 8-pointed star, I think. But you can get a totally different look just with fabric placement. So that's Grandma's Star. I think she has you cutting one. I can't see upside down. The next one is Road to Paradise, which kind of looks like Grandma's Star, doesn't it? This one's Road to Paradise. And then our final one is the Guiding Star, and again, they tell you to make 2. And I think the reason they tell you to make 2 is there's a really cool way to cut out a 2-for-1 with these blocks. But here are 8 blocks that you can pick 1 extra block and just put it in your quilt to make a grid of 9. Or some of your club members have done a whole quilt out of just 1 block. It's beautiful. Beth, you know who you are, made the quilt in the back, which is the falling leaves. So there are a lot of patterns in this book. This was really a great value for you. So stay tuned. We're going to talk now about some of those tips and tricks. So here are a couple of different cutting options. We've already talked about taking our die with our label and the straight grain and doing a fan folding. So that's probably the most common way to cut, is just by laying our fabric with a straight grain, going the direction of the label. Now we're going to line it up with the shape, so now it's going to be at an angle, okay? And then we're just going to fan fold back and forth like this, and then we can put our mat on and cut it. And that way, when you're cutting your 6 layers at a time, you'll get, that many more shapes. So that's a wonderful, fast way to cut, very efficient. Now that works for almost all of our dies. However, if a die is directional, so a parallelogram or a trapezoid or a kite, for instance, those shapes are some of the ones that you can't just fan fold, because as you fan fold, you're going to have a right side up, a wrong side down, for instance. And then so when you fan fold, all of a sudden your shapes are going the wrong way and you don't have the right shapes that you need. So you need to pay a little bit more attention when you're doing that. So fan folding for most of them. We're going to talk about well, let's go ahead and talk about the flip-flop method. The flip-flop method is actually making good use of your fabric, and you can control your shape and the direction it goes in. So this is actually kind of what it looks like, but let me show you how this works. We have this is actually called a triangle and a square. This is part of the angle set. So if I here's my straight grain, and if I put my fabric to cover my triangle, so it's at an angle like this, I'm just going to do 2 layers just so you can kind of get an idea, all right? And I can pull that way back, so as long as I don't see, let's see, oh, hold on. As long as I don't see that other contrasting color, I know it's going to cut, so I'm going to put it this way. All right, I'm going to take my mat, I'm going to put it on there. I'm just going to put the extra right here. I'm going to push it up to my roller. I'm going to, gosh, it's like there's nothing in there. It's so easy to roll. Okay, I'm going to pull this out, give it some love in, twist, pull it off. Oops, okay, and there's this one. Okay, just like that. And flip-flopping, can you see from down here? Okay, when I flip-flop, that means I'm just going to turn it over. Now look, see how I get really good use? There's like no waste. Isn't that wonderful? So I've just turned that over. Again, I'm just going to cover my shape, put my mat on. So it's just kind of like sliding and just moving it down. But that way, there's not a lot of waste. So we flip-flopped it. We're going to take that off, and there you go. Look at, there's like no, that's all the waste you get. Isn't that great? So that's the way you can cut out shapes like this. All right, that's the flip-flop method. So when she talks about that in her directions, you'll know what it is. If you forget, it's on page 14 of your book, all right? All right. Now, she's going to talk a lot about smart stacking. So smart stacking is really a great idea. I use this a lot. You guys know how much we love half square triangles now. We used to all hate them because they were wonky and you'd have to trim and you had those points that your machine wanted to eat up. So now we love them because AccuQuilt took all the angst out of it. Now, if you're doing, for instance, sets that are going to be sewn together like half square triangles, you can take your fabric. And this is called smart stacking because you're smart about it. You're going to take the two different fabrics you're going to use. For instance, if I had these two fabrics and I wanted to make a half square triangle set, I'm going to take my shapes, I'm going to put them right sides together, okay? And then I'm just going to cover my shape just like this. And I'm just going to do 4 layers this time. So I have that set is 2, I have another set that's 4. I'm going to put them on top of each other with the mat. All right, here's my label going on the outside, bringing them up to the rollers. I can do this with my eyes closed. It's so easy. Getting exercise with my right arm. Okay, now, have my die. I'm going to slide that off. All right, and then I like to, can you see from here? Okay, I like to, again, just put my fingers on those shapes and then just pull the excess away, just like that. Now, at this point, this is when I get my tray out again, and I just pick these up and put them on my tray. This was compression cutting, so it pressed down to cut those shapes out. And the nice thing about that is they're stuck together now. They're kind of holding on to each other. So you can actually pick them up like this, just take them to their machine. They're already together, right? You don't have to get this blue and this white and put them together and line them up. They're already together. So you can just start sewing with them through your machine, and then you'll have this big old long strand, and they're done that fast. Really fun to do. So that's smart stacking. You're smart about it, right? One more technique that they have in the book. This one is on page 68 of your book. It's for that last block, which is, let me tell you what it is. It is the guiding stars, where she encouraged you to cut out 2 at once. So what I'm doing is, this is a, excuse me, in her instructions, she'll tell you to cut, for the 6-inch, for instance, an 8.5-inch square. And we took that 8.5-inch square, we folded it in half again, so we have a quarter of it now, like this. Here's my fold, here's my shape hiding underneath here, this is the kite, and so my fold is at the top, and the right angle of that square goes along that right angle there. So I'm just going to cover that up. I'm going to put my mat on. Here's my label. I'm going to put that so it goes through the machine on the side. We're going to roll that through. All right, we're going to twist that off. Okay, we got that out of there. Okay, so there are my kites. I'm going to put those to the side. The other shape that we needed were those triangle and a square. Okay, so now we're going to take that same piece of fabric that we have left over, and I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to put it over my triangle. See how that fits? I'm going to use almost every bit of this fabric. And everybody always asks me, is there a lot of waste with the AccuQuilt cutter? I don't think so. All right, so I'm putting this on. I'm going to roll it through. This is 2 layers now, right? Let's see if we get what we wanted. I'm going to twist that off. Oh, look at that. There's our triangles in a square. And so then you have this little bit left over. Look at that. There's your other two right here. We'll just take those up like this. We're going to put that on here like that. It's going to cover that up. Isn't that amazing? Who thinks of these things? All right, so now we're going to put that last little bit through. You just want to do this because it's fun, even if you don't even use this block. All right, and then we're going to twist this off. There's our remaining two triangles in a square. This is all I have left over from that square. Pretty neat, isn't it? Here we are at the sewing machine. I just wanted to give you a few tips and tricks on sewing string piecing together, maybe sewing the beginning of half square triangles. Sometimes people are worried that their machines are going to eat that up. So there's a couple tips and tricks I'd like to share with you that I do at home. So for the most part, when I start sewing with my machine, there's your top thread is laying right here, and I always just place my hand there because you have your top thread that's loose, you have a bobbin thread that's loose. They're trying to meet in the middle to create that first stitch, so they're both pulling together. So instead of it pulling down into your machine, I'm not like holding it, I'm just laying my hand on it very gently. So here is one of our sets. Remember, we cut out all these half square triangle sets. They're together with compression, so I'm not even going to use a pin. Isn't that lovely? So if you look at the shape of this half square triangle, you'll see that the ears are already taken off, so you don't have a point that you're starting with, which is lovely. And so what you're going to do instead, you're going to train your eye to look at this tip right here. That's going to be your 1/4 of an inch. You're going to start here, and you're going to end here. All right, that's all you need to remember. So I'm just going to lay my hand on that thread. I'm going to, now see, I'm putting my foot down. I'm not worrying right now about what's happening over here. I'm worrying about my tip, the very point, because that's where I want my needle to go. So I'm going to plant my needle in right there and go. And so then if you needed to adjust it, you can turn it at this point to get it lined up with the side of your foot, and then you just go, just like that. And look, I ended up at the other side. Wasn't that fun? So you just keep going. Look at this. No pins, Mom. So easy. I'm using my freehand system, the knee lift, so I can just feed those right in. And they just go through like this. And see how I'm not starting and stopping? You don't have to worry about cutting all the time. I'm just going to feed. So this is called string piecing. You don't have to keep stopping. It's a very fast way to do it. Just feeding those in. I'll probably stop with this one so you don't have to watch me sew all day. I'm starting with that point, just like that. See how nothing got eaten? I didn't have any tips eaten up. Okay, this one shifted just a tad. We're going to put it back in place like that. Okay, now I'm going to use my scissor cutter because I can. It's a great feature on these machines. All right, now we have all these right here. If you're using the bigger sizes, they'll be bigger. Obviously, aren't these cute? Now this you have to have. These cutting gizmos are super cool. They have a sturdy base. There is a blade in the top here. And so if you have like 30, 40 of these things, which it's very easy to do and you can do them in no time, you're just going to place it over the blade and cut all those. You don't have to pick up any scissors and they're done. Wasn't that cool? And then all you have to do is you're going to take them to your pressing board, your pressing surface. If you're pressing towards the dark, for instance, you're always going to want to have the side up that you want your seam allowance to go to. So you'll see I have a light and I have a dark, and I want my seams to go to the dark. So I'm going to put this on my pressing surface, and I'm going to set my stitches by just pressing my iron down. I actually have our really cool little rolling presser thing. And so I can take this also and just press open like this, just like that. I have a perfect half square triangle, and look, my seams are going to the dark. We just sewed our half square triangles. Here are some 1/4 square triangles. I cheated and I sewed 2 sets of 1/4 square triangles together. They're going to go like this, okay? So what I did is I sewed them together. When you have a shape like this, it's easier to start at that right angle here because it's not going to move, there's no guessing, and then you'll sew to that point, that tip. Wasn't that easy? Then I pressed towards the dark, just like that. So I have 2 sets like this. I'm going to put them right sides together, and because we press towards the dark, you'll see that they'll nest beautifully together, and my centers are going to match very nicely. So let's sew that together. Again, just like on our half square triangles, I'm going to start at that point and end at the point. get it all lined up, and again, I don't have to use hands. Just going to start sewing. Make sure it's lined up. You always really just need to pay attention to what's on your needle at the time, and then catch everything else up. Okay, we're going to cut that. All right. So here we have our hourglass block. Wasn't that fast and easy? No distortion. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over, and I'm still going to, what I'm going to do at this point is, actually I'm going to press them all in one direction. That is pressing towards the red. This one's going to go to the green. That one's going to go to the red. And I'm going to press this one this way, because I'm going to show you how to pinwheel the back. This is how, when she talks about swirling, right here, if I had just left that all together, I could get a bump right here. So I'm going to go right here to this middle where we had our intersection. I'm just going to pick out a couple of those stitches right to the seam line, just like that. So those are coming out. That should already be loose, because just like that. Okay. So when they all go in the one direction, that's going to swirl into like a 4 patch on the back and make it nice and flat. And you just have to take those little stitches out. Here's the other seam going the other direction. I'm just going to take out those couple of stitches. Kathy brought me a seam ripper. I guess I could use that. All right. Do you think they can see this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Such a good photographer back there. I'm so lucky. Okay, look at this. It's just like a cute little 4 patch on the back. See how that swirls? So all these seams are going like in a swirl direction, and because I just took out those couple of stitches right down to that seam line, I can make that so nice and flat. It's just as flat as the rest of my block, and it has that cute little 4 patch on the back. Okay? All right, here's the final piece. We're going to talk about some of those unusual shapes, like the square in a square, or this one here is your triangle in a square, or this is actually the kite. So the shapes are a little bit different, and you need to pay attention to the direction of them. We're going to start with a square in a square, and I've actually, you can see, I've already started sewing parts of it on, but I left one just for you. So you have your square, and all you have to do is line up, you just line up that straight edge with the straight edge of the square. Okay, so I'm going to, and if you look at this, the ones that were on previously, it'll match perfectly because the ears are cut off. Isn't that great? Look how flat. You just, there's no guessing. You don't have to guess about it at all. So we're going to sew that on right now. Rolling all over here. Okay, here we go. All right, we're just going to start, and off we go. Cut that thread. Look how fast it is to sew when you have an AccuQuilt cutter. And we're just going to set our stitches and press that out, and we have a perfect square in a square. All right. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the triangle in a square. So if you'll look at these pieces, let's just put it right here so you can see. These are very directional. So you have a left side and you have a right side. And if you just pick them up, it's, you know, that fits too, but then your block isn't going to be right. So if you just lay everything out right, she actually tells you to do that in the book, and just put all your pieces down together at once, you won't make the mistake of sewing them upside down and doing our famous unsewing, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take this triangle and we're going to flip it onto this, it's the other pieces to your square in a square actually. So we're gonna, your triangle in a square, we're gonna take that, we're gonna bring it over here, and I don't know if you can see this, but I have my white piece down, and I have my triangle on top, and see how that matches beautifully? We have our straight edges there. So what we're going to do, and again, I'm just gonna get that lined up because I wanna get right here at this point. I'm gonna plant my needle down, and then I can adjust the rest of my fabric. Always stop with your needle down, ladies. and gentlemen. All right, and we're just going to sew to the end, just like this. Just like that. We're going to clip it. Okay, we're going to press towards the dark, just like that. So that's one side of it. Now we're going to add the other. I'm just going to grab it off the wall. Let's do our check. So here it is like that. That's going to be our finishing piece. I'm going to flip this over here like this. We're going to look at, isn't it so much nicer to have a flat point instead of a pointy point, because then you know exactly what you're matching up. And when you have precision cutting, it just all fits together beautifully. Just like that. I can't get it flat, but there you go. So we're going to sew that one. All right, I'm going to make sure everything's all lined up because I'm going to give it the gas. There we go. And I'm just going to switch this guy over just a tad. All my toys here. Okay, then right to the point. We're going to clip that. And actually, you really want to press towards the wings, but there you go. You get the idea. There's our, wasn't that fast? Now, if you had used a ruler to cut out all those pieces and all that bias going on, it would not look that square. We're going to place it back on the wall, just like that. Look how beautiful that is. We have one more piece left. This is our kite block. We're using these same side pieces that we used on our triangle and a square. I've already sewed one of the sides on in the same way. So I'm going to turn it this way so you can see. I have that flat top that I'm matching with the edge here, and it's just going to meet down at the bottom with the other one. Isn't that simple? So we're just going to sew that one together. So easy to do. And all the way down to the bottom. Make sure you're lined up. Okay, here we go. Okay, all done. Look how fast your quilt's going to go together. We did that so quickly. So just play with all your colors, your scraps. Just have fun with it. It's so much fun to be able to try all different techniques. Blocks you might have been intimidated to do before. You don't need to be intimidated any longer. Thanks for joining me today.